this?
Hey, this is a bunch of junk! They didn't give me any of the stuff I wanted!
It's Pretty Fly, a 90s nostalgia podcast, the show where two completely average dudes in their 30s from Australia talk about their favourite pop culture they never grew out of. My name is Bo Nicholson. I enjoy the finer things in pop culture, like critically acclaimed movies, music, and TV shows.
Yeah, my name's Daniel Lang. I'm a pop culture everyman. I like fast cars, loud noises, and these are the books our forefathers read, and our five fathers, and our six fathers. And I'm not stopping now.
I don't know who said that. Part of me wants to guess that it's Tommy Pickles' grandfather, but I've got a feeling it might just be Tommy Pickles.
It is. It's Tommy Pickles. He's been given a book about Hanukkah, and he comes out with that, which I think is a very good line. Four fathers, five fathers, and six fathers.
It's a very good line. It is a TV show that was a phenomenon when we were children in the 90s. Rugrats, of course, it started in 1991. It had a number of seasons, all the way up until 2006. It also had a spin-off series, of course, which was called All Grown Up, I believe. And then there's a brand new series, in fact, in 3D animation that's just come out. 5 episodes of that. There's a Rugrats movie, there's a game, there's a whole bunch of different spin-offs. As I said, in terms of 90s children's phenomenons, in the mid to late 90s particularly, it's pretty much this or Pokemon that sort of strike in my memory, Dan, as things that were just freaking huge.
Yeah, that's the two. I feel like you were either obsessed with Rugrats or obsessed with Pokemon. For me, I was obsessed with Pokemon. But I think a lot of that, like obviously Pokemon was a phenomenon in its own right, and the whole trading card thing was massive. But I think, like, I know it started in 91, but I remember we got pay television or cable or, Foxtel, whatever you want to call it, in around sort of 97, 98, I think is when we first got it. Because we lived rurally, so it wasn't really a big thing. We were one of the first families to get it in our area. And
flex.
So big time. And I remind people every time I go back, can you remember those days? So I think I was, kind of like 9 years old, a little bit too old for Rugrats, whereas my sister, who would have been 6, was like the perfect age to be obsessed with it. And at that age, anything that your sister is obsessed with, particularly your little sister, is not cool, can never be cool, and you shouldn't watch it or enjoy it. So I really didn't want to give Rugrats a chance because my sister liked it, and for that exact reason. It's not going to be cool if she likes it. So when she wants to watch it, it'll be, we fight over the TV and it would go on, and, you would kind of watch it but zone out or wait till the next Nickelodeon show came on because there was always something else coming on.
I know that it was made for Nickelodeon. I knew that. But I was trying to rack my brain to work out whether it was on Nickelodeon that I remembered it, because my family got Foxtel, thank you, Mr. Murdoch, around about the same time as your family did. It was around the time that there was Bart Simpson was basically the poster boy for Foxtel, and there'd be like the Foxtel logo, and then he'd be skateboarding across the top of it being like, I want my Foxtel, as he falls off. Do you remember that?
Yep, I do remember that. Although that came a little bit later, because when it first came to our area, it wasn't even called Foxtel. It was called Ozstar.
Ozstar, yes.
And then Foxtel bought out Ozstar because that's what Rupert Murdoch does. Not to get political. But Ozstar was ushered along into the Foxtel family. So, it sort of came a little bit later again. But you're right. It was very... The Simpsons was like the big... Because, you always had 3 hours of The Simpsons on a Saturday morning on Fox 8, which was like heaven when you couldn't sit and watch them at will whenever you wanted. Like Saturday morning before cricket, after cricket was still on. What a show.
I was talking to
Sorry,
my housemate.
this is a show about Rugrats, right? It's not about the Simpsons.
Let's just talk about The Simpsons. Fuck it.
Simpsons.
How good are The Simpsons? I was talking to my housemate Matt about this, and he did not have pay TV as a child, but he can vividly remember watching a lot of Rugrats. So he was convinced that it must have been on free-to-air television, maybe on the ABC, which is the Australian broadcasting, the national broadcaster here in Australia. So, I remember it being on Nickelodeon. Do you remember it being on anything other than pay TV?
No, 100% was a Foxtel pay TV show, I thought.
Yeah.
Did his parents just have like a DVD or a VHS that they just kept dropping in and he was watching maybe? Because I don't think so.
Maybe it was just one of those things like maybe his friend had Foxtel and it was one of those cultural phenomenons like we're talking about, that every time you went over to your friend's house and you're like 10 years old or 8 or 9 or whatever, you just friggin' watched Rugrats, right? Like that was the thing to do. So I think maybe Matt has his wires crossed a little bit. I think it was it was certainly written and created for Nickelodeon in 1991. I do know that. And it still gets the old rerun on Nickelodeon. The reason I decided to recommend this to you is that I have very fond memories, not vivid memories, vague memories, but I have memories of really loving this show. I used to watch it religiously, which meant that I created a Bible for it and watched it every Sunday. And it was, it sort of came back on my radar. I completely forgot about Rugrats until I was at a person's house who I support in my job as a support worker. And he is about my age, early 30s, but he still likes children's television for the most part, generally speaking. So when I'm there helping him out at his house, he'll throw on Nickelodeon, and being the connoisseur of the fine arts that I am, I really got into some of the stuff that I was watching. Like, for example, did you know that there is currently, or not currently, I think it's finished now, but it was a few years ago, there was like a Nickelodeon TV show version of School of Rock, for example?
I did not.
No, it's terrible.
No, look, I'm not watching a lot of Nickelodeon these days, if I'm honest. But
you do have a niece, don't you? She might be a bit young, though.
I do, but I don't think she's. We're Paw Patrol and Bluey.
Yes,
we like a lot of Paw Patrol and Bluey, and we love like the Disney movies. We like the Disney movies. Yeah, John.
There is a Paw Patrol movie coming out, so make sure you take her along to that as a very cool uncle. You'll get some very big brownie points there, I'm sure. But I was watching this Nickelodeon and a bunch of these really rubbish bloody shows are on, like The Loud House, and it's just nonsense stuff. And then Rugrats came on, and I was like, oh shit, like I completely forgot about this show. And then it's got like Tommy and Angelica. Everyone remembers Angelica. Chucky, Finster, the little redhead kid, basically like their version of Millhouse, I think.
Yep, checks out the poor redhead kid.
Yeah, did that hit home for you at all, by the way?
Yeah, in hindsight, I don't. Not looking back, the problem for me was you kind of asked who I identified with, and the obvious answer was Chucky. But I was a bit of a bully when I was a kid, so it's more Angelica.
Yeah, you're an Angelica. I can totally see it. You're definitely an Angelica. I'd like to see myself as a Tommy Pickles. Like, you know, everyone likes to see themselves as a hero, right? And he was definitely the leader, the hero. Looking back, I don't know how much of this show you managed to watch in the last week or so. I hope it wasn't too much for your own sanity, because you're a 32-year-old man and deserve better than that. But I actually really, really kind of empathized a bit with Stu Pickles, the dad, like the weird inventor that like can't seem to make anything work exactly how he wants, but he gets close a few times.
Absolutely,
I feel like Stu is like a real vibe for me, like with our moderately successful podcast. Like it just feels like a vibe for me. So I think I'm probably a Stu, and I'm watching this just being like, ah, man, like it sucks growing up because I remember this show being freaking awesome. You don't obviously remember it that way. With the week of torture that I just subjected you to, did you change your opinion of Rugrats at all, or do you still think it sucks?
Look, there was. I won't say it sucks. I think there were a lot of deeper themes that I was definitely not picking up when I was forcing my way through it. You're 100% right with Stu. There is, that trying to support your family, trying to, stay above the poverty line, basically. And these guys are, I think you look at the family and there is this, that, they're doing all right. They're homeowners. They're, doing okay. They're relatively middle class, but when they go grocery shopping, Dee Dee's got the calculator. You can't afford an over expense or something like that. So they're not flush with cash. So you definitely see that side of things. One of the quotes that definitely hit me was Stu. He's up cooking in the morning. Dee Dee bursts in. It's 4:00 in the morning. Why on earth are you making chocolate pudding? And he just responds in a dressing gown, because I've lost control of my life.
Wow.
Which is just a great line.
My goodness, we're about to have a very deep podcast about the Rugrats.
Yeah. And look, I've got some other stuff coming, don't worry. But to me, that was like, yeah, dude, as a guy, like, we don't really... I watched like 5 or 6 episodes and one of the movies. The other movie was in the early 2000s, so I didn't watch that. Yeah. But I watched the first movie, which came out in 98. And they're like about to have a second kid, as you said, struggling for cash. But they're about, our kind of age. They're in their 30s at some point there. They've got young kids. They're trying to make ends meet. I'm already doing that, and I don't even have kids. Like, it's not that easy. And you look at, this was a changing period, not just in America where the show's based, but in the world. These are the people that are boomers now. These are like the meme, okay, boomer, whatever type people. And, definitely like Stu's brother Drew would be definitely a MAGA voter for sure, 100%.
Yes.
And I'm not sure. I mean, Grandpa Stu would be dead by now, but he probably went. There was a part where he had alien porn, so he had some things going on. Old Grandpa Stu.
Grandpa Lou, I think.
Lou, that's it. Sorry, he had like alien vixens or something on VHS. So, he had some more shit going on than just that. But the socioeconomic shift in the 90s from this period of growth and prosperity where capitalism was winning for everybody and we're all doing great to the real life restrictions and boundaries that are imposed by a capitalist system are starting to become exposed. And obviously I'm not going to sit here and make this a podcast about why I think socialism is a better political ideology,
and why not?
See that there are, I'd love to. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's very important that we get to see that it's not all easy. We see a single dad with a mother who was lost in Chucky and Chucky's dad, who I can remember his name, Chaz.
Well, is it just like Chuck Senior by any chance? Like, are they also? Is he Charles or?
I feel like, was it Chaz or Charles or something? I don't know. It didn't really sink in, I'm going to be honest. But Chaz, it was Chaz Finster. Damn.
All right. Up you go. There you go.
You see that. We see...
Chaz and Kira Finster. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fitting in with the vibe there a little bit. But we see, like, Phil and Lil's mum is this strong, independent, very pro-female woman. We see a whole lot of, different people. We see Angelica's mum. Again, I'm not even going to try her name.
Charlotte, I think.
She's like, that rings a bell. She's like this high-flying corporate bigwig who's always on a phone, and I think her husband's like an accountant or some shit. So they're like work-orientated, and Grandpa Lou has to live with his son for whatever he's got going on. I didn't really pick up why. on that one. But of all that, the thing I loved the most, and when they had the second baby in the movie, Tommy's little brother, they called him Dill.
Yeah, Dill Pickles.
Dill Pickles. And I just respect that.
Yeah, fair enough. Dylan, of course, but Dill Pickles, yeah.
Yeah, Dill Pickle. I just love wordplay, you know? And you're always going to win me over with a bit of wordplay. So, have we landed that you have grown an appreciation for Rugrats despite your childhood resistance to it? I think appreciation is a good word for it. I'm not...
Respect.
Yeah, I'm never going to watch the show again, I'll be honest. And I can say that pretty confidently, although I would have said that before this podcast, so...
You're welcome.
So thank you for that. But I think it became popular for a reason. I think it was really accessible and easy. It had the hero protagonist. I didn't realize, obviously, when I was young, but Tommy was a premature baby. So he's like a genuine little battler. Like, he is beating all the odds, this kid, you know? And I vaguely remember he was having nightmares about, like, being in a box or something. And in hindsight, that was like being in the air thingy-mabob, oxygen-y, boxy thing. You can tell I went to medical school.
With like the oxygen and everything that they sort of attach to pregnant babies.
Yeah. So that's something that ties together very simply. There's some good little jokes. I think the show definitely got a bit more polished as it grew. It wasn't great animation, but it was watchable animation as well. And I think there's a great thing with a lot of children's shows is that there are just enough little references for adults that keep them interested when they have to watch the episode or the show for the 500th time. One of the episodes I did watch, the guy was called Dr. Lecter. Like, they had to go and see the doctor. It was Dr. Lecter, and I did enjoy that. I was like, that's good. Look, definitely some respect. It's a likable show. I can see why it ran for so long. But overall, yeah, like, I'm not going to rush out and finish watching the rest of it.
Like, the very small amount of it that I just rewatched for the episode that I subjected us to, you're welcome, is, and I will be expecting my comeuppance. You and I have very different tastes, and I know that later in the season you have an album and a movie to expose me to. I expect some comeuppance in that period of time, probably. Don't want to give you too many ideas. Thank you. But the very small amount that I did watch in preparation for this, it's dated. It's certainly dated. One thing that I certainly picked up on was, and I'm glad that you did too, was this family that they've put together. And again, it's kind of like The Simpsons, and there is some carryover there because, of course, Nancy Cartwright produced voices for both series. And it was the idea that there's this middle-class family that they have a house, like, things are okay, but they're not that okay. And, you know, like, at a certain point, like, what is... And the 90s, by the way, was, as you say, this period of almost... let's call maybe the 50s might have been the best period for American finance in America, but like the 90s was also really, really good, and it was sure a lot better than the late 2000s, which is just before the series ended, as it turns out. And so, like, financial stresses that we know in our generation are so different 30 years ago when this show was first produced, which is crazy to think of when you think about it, isn't it? 30 years since the Rugrats started, right?
I was very surprised.
Yeah,
that it started as early as it did. I just kind of thought it was like a mid to late 90s show.
Yeah, no, it was early, and and really a flagship program for Nickelodeon. It was a big reason why Nickelodeon was as successful as it was and still is. But yeah, one thing that I sort of picked up on was, wow, this is kind of like a little time capsule within this show, which is inherently silly. Like it's cute and silly, really. But there is a little bit of just capturing a time and a place in middle America, not middle America, but middle class America, and this idealism in Stu Pickles. That's something that I really resonated with. I'll go back to him again. Is this feeling of, okay, well, I need to provide for my family, like you say, and it's very tough out there, and I just need to come up with something, and he just keeps reaching further than he has the ability to grasp. And he just falls short every time, but he keeps reaching. He's just such an ambitious, idealistic person. And I don't know, I really enjoyed seeing that, I didn't really dig a lot of the stuff. One thing I actually did dig, though, was as the kids, and you mentioned the 4 fathers, the 5 fathers, and the 6 fathers, I loved that sort of stuff in the show. Like, for example, there's this one where Tommy is just sitting there. He's like, oh, well, I guess everything is back to Norman. Instead of normal. Just little things like that. Just saying the wrong word here or there, or saying the word incorrectly. It was the hopsicle instead of the hospital. Just like little things like that. It's just like, oh yeah, that's right. These are little babies. Like, they shouldn't be saying, Churchillian verses. Yeah.
Was in the same episode where I quoted the 4 fathers, 5 fathers, they were given a book about Plato, obviously the great philosopher, and Chucky goes, "Look, Tommy, a whole book about Plato." Chucky did deliver some great lines. Another one I watched. I know it's kind of early to be thinking about marriage, but hey, I'm going to be 3 next year.
Is that Chucky as well?
Yes, that was Chucky as well. Dropped some of the best ones. Dropped some of the best lines.
Chucky was definitely a highlight. I think Tommy is the obvious choice for people that, generally when they're kids, they do gravitate towards Tommy. Chucky, an underrated hero, it's fair to say. Angelica has more of a heart than that is led on, and there are episodes in this series where you certainly get to know Angelica inside and out. But it's to me, it's Tommy's show. Not so much as an adult looking back at it now, but say Dan, if you were to have children, or at least influence over children, like your niece or nephew or whatever, mm-hmm. would you recommend? Would you sit them down in front of Rugrats and be pretty happy with that choice?
Look, I'm still kind of convinced that I can just put on animation that I like, and they'll just be really happy with the colors.
So South Park?
I don't even really like South Park that much.
Oh, that's right. We've gone through this, haven't we?
Definitely The Simpsons. I got in trouble for exposing my 2.5, 3-year-old niece to The Simpsons at one point. Later informed that was inappropriate. Look, I wouldn't go out of my way. There are better kids shows. Like, if I'm going to pick out a bunch of kids shows or cartoons for kids, I'm going to be hitting Pinky and the Brain, Angry Beavers, Invader Zim, shit that I like, so I can sit and enjoy it as well.
Ren and Stimpy. Does Ren and Stimpy get a run?
See, I never really got into Ren and Stimpy either.
No, good choice. Good choice.
Yeah.
That shit was whack.
I used to feel like it was a bit gross, and I didn't mind gross stuff, but that was just one of those things that was no thanks, I'll pass on that. But Hey Arnold was one that, talking about your Nickelodeon stable,
football head.
Hey Arnold, and I think you had the Thornberrys,
the Wild Thornberrys.
That's it, the Wild Thornberrys. So there are some Nickelodeon type shows in that period that I would probably enjoy watching a little bit more. But, if my kids were kids that were desperate to watch Rugrats, which I think my wife will very much encourage. She's talking to her about it. She's a big Rugrats fan. Mm-hmm. I think, I could sit there and and get through it without, being too upset.
What does Tiff like about Rugrats? I understand that Tiff's a bit of an introvert and probably doesn't want to actually come on the podcast herself, but what does she dig about the show? Like, I'm curious to know.
Look, we had a little bit of a chat. We didn't, really analyze it that much. It was more just how she said she loved it. But if I was a betting man, I think she as a kid in particular, she come from a home that was had a bit of upheaval. I think she really grasped onto the idea of like family units and big happy families where everyone was together, which is certainly, as you see, there's a lot of that in the Rugrats, and people dealing with absence and people being gone from lives and stuff like that.
Hey Dan and Bo and all of the listeners to Pretty Fly. I'm Mark and I am one half of the team that presents Right in the Childhood, another podcast on the We Made This Podcast network. For those of you that don't know, our podcast is a kind of both ends side of millennial children's TV podcast. What I mean by that is I'm a late Gen Xer and my friend Fraser is a early Gen Z. Gen Zer? I'm not even sure what we call them. But with that, and so neither of us are millennials, but we're kind of millennials. Whereas Bo and Dan, you are both very firmly in the millennial kind of category. And I've always found generations fascinating. And as we've done Right in the Childhood, we've noticed that there's almost no TV shows that cross over from my childhood as a 42-year-old to Fraser's childhood as a 26-year-old. And the one exception that we found is Rugrats. So for all three of our generations, Rugrats has been something that has been special to our childhoods. It was right at the tail end of my kind of children's telly watching that I started to watch Rugrats, and I did enjoy it more than I probably should have done for my age. Whereas for Fraser, it was right at the start of his, as he was getting that and all grown up and stuff like that. So I think there's something special about Rugrats, something that you can't quite put your finger on. It shouldn't be as iconic or as cool as it is, because when you think about the premise, it's just kind of there. It's nothing spectacular. But what it does have is some really lovely stories, some really kind of strong moral messages. And we decided ages ago that we would like to cover Rugrats on Right in the Childhood because, like I say, it is the only thing that we have that crosses over both of our childhoods. So I can't wait to hear what you've got to say about Rugrats. And later on in this year, there's going to be a Right in the Childhood that covers it as well. So We Made This Podcast network. We're all about Rugrats. And there's a reason for that. It's bloody brilliant.
I made mention of the fact that there was a new series that has just arrived out, so Rugrats is somewhat actually topical, even, believe it or not. Do you feel like there's a need for Rugrats in 2021? Particularly the new incarnation of it.
I think you had to... I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the original is dated. And, it is a bit of a time capsule of its period. So if you're looking at, a reboot where you're taking the same characters, it's one of those things where it's a lot easier than trying to greenlight or put together a brand new production, I guess, with a modern twist. Honestly, now I haven't seen it, obviously. But if you had told me or asked me what would... modern day Rugrats be like, I would have just said, 4 or 5 kids sitting around with iPads.
Yes.
It's pretty much just what kids do these days. So
yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it?
I can't imagine it's as exciting, but it's a lot less imagination and roaming around. But I can see why they would, take a known property and sort of repackage it with a new modern visage.
Well, I've looked at some of the videos of it, and it looks. I mean, they've obviously updated the animation to a 3D computer animation. I kind of like the old style a bit more. I'm a bit more of a hand drawn kind of animate. Like, I didn't like. I mean, there was one episode of The Simpsons where they did that, but that was kind of, for a point, like where Homer slips into the third dimension or whatever. But like, apart from that, I like it when shows just sort of stick to 2D. 2D works. 2D is completely fine, and it looks kind of shitty to me, the 3D animation.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. As I said, I like a lot of adult animation, and we already mentioned BoJack Horseman last week. Archer is another one that I think is tremendous, and they do stick to that sort of old school 2D animation format. So I don't think that's, I don't think newer and shinier is necessarily better.
Off air, you mentioned to me something about controversy with Rugrats. Do you have more meat to throw on that bone?
Well, yeah. So you've got Phil and Lil's mum, right? Now, her name is Betty.
Betty DeVille.
Previously she's been married to Howard, but I think there was a split there or something because she's a single mum.
Okay.
But it's been confirmed by the woman who is voicing her in the reboot, which is Natalie Morales, that she is now an openly gay character.
Okay.
Which is obviously, greatly upset people who feel the need to be upset by that sort of thing, which I don't think either of us are.
Like who? Like who could possibly? Who does that affect? Really? Like is James Woods coming out of the is it Roseanne Barr to throw back to last episode?
Yeah, look, the people who are angry about it are the people that think Roseanne Barr and James Woods have a good point when they talk politics. That's the people who are upset by it mostly, as far as I can tell. I think it's another example of hard right snowflakism. Personally, it changes nothing. And let's be honest, they even say, like the article here, Morales says, anyone who watched the original may have had an inkling that Betty was a member of the Alphabet Mafia, which is obviously the LGBTQI+. I think I got that all in.
Yeah, I think so.
I feel like, it's not a surprise because she literally had the logo for like the female symbol on her jumper, didn't she? Like, it was very.
I think so.
She's very proud, proud female. I'm trying to work out how to say it properly, but I wasn't surprised, but I also, I guess, wasn't surprised at the reaction from certain niches within the community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at an illustration of Betty DeVille right now, and I mean, if you said what is the sexual orientation of this person, I would say it could be either. Like, I don't know, could be any of the aforementioned LGBTIQ plus. But it could also be, a straight person. Like, I don't know. But, like, the feminist symbolism right on the front of the shirt is a bit of a tell. And, like, at the end of the day, who fucking cares? Like, actually, you know what? There are people who care. You know who cares? It's the people that are underrepresented in this sort of media. And there would be kids out there that have two mums or two dads, or one mum, but mum likes to hang around with other girls, or one dad and dad likes to hang out with other dudes, or whatever it is. And they, in the 90s version of the show, weren't really represented. And they can't see themselves out there. But suddenly, Phil and Lil have two mums, presumably, or at least, she's hanging out with other women. And that's fine. That's part of the world. And, what do these right-wing snowflakes want? Do they want just no representation of these people? Like, yes, they are a part of our society. We know they're a part of our society, but we don't want them to be. Therefore, we're just going to erase them from all types of media. Is that the end goal?
Yeah, and look, you're 100% right. And the key word you said was representation. And it's something I didn't understand all that much until fairly recently. Now, I am, of the opinion I don't particularly care what your sexual orientation is. If you vibe with me, I'll vibe with you. I'm very comfortable. I think there was a period growing up where people in my life thought I might be gay because I was a little bit effeminate and really into drama. But it just goes to show it doesn't really matter what you're into or what you do in regards to your sexual orientation. It's a very specific part of you. And I think representation is something. I read a great article written by Erica Tamposi, who is the producer of a couple of really big podcasts, the Jeselnik and Rosenthal Vanity Project and Around the NFL. And she's an openly gay woman working in NFL gridiron media, which doesn't really bode as the most accepting and open space. Sure. And she wrote a piece about coming out. And the NFL has been really pushing pride and acceptance in diversity of sexual orientation and gender fluidity and all that sort of thing. And she wrote a piece basically about how great it was that she felt supported and pushed and comfortable in that environment. But then only a few weeks ago, Carl Nassib of the Las Vegas Raiders became the first openly gay active NFL player. So on a roster, good player. There was a fella, Michael Sams, who was drafted by the Rams, who sort of never made the cut. He was gay going into the draft, so it was a bit of a story, unfortunately. But he never really made the cut, so it was kind of like a brief media fling almost. But Nassib's on his third NFL contract. He's a very good, very big player. And he's just come out and basically said, look, I wish it wasn't or didn't have to be a big news story, but, in the world we are in, I just thought I'd come out and say I'm gay. And obviously, I went trawling through the comments looking for the dickheads, as I'm really gravitate towards negativity sometimes.
You and I both, my friend. You and I both.
Yeah, it's very difficult not to sometimes. But coming from that, it was sort of talking about actually having representation at that level is such a different thing to just saying, okay, we accept you. Now it's literal representation at the peak of that sport. So I think it's only a positive that there is representation of the LGBTQI plus community in something like this show, which doesn't negatively affect anyone. People can choose to let it negatively affect them, but overall it doesn't negatively affect anyone. It has that positive outlook, that positive message of representation for people who can look at that and say, there is someone like me in that community and in that space and in that show. So I think representation is very undersold. And for the people that want to say, just leave things how they are, or there is a very different and evolving world, and we are evolving as part of that. And the onus is on you to evolve with that. And if you don't want to, you're being left behind. I'm sorry, but fuck off. You're on your own. If you want to sit in that world and hold on to that shit, I'm really sorry. Like, there's easier and better ways to live your life, man, and that's a shit way to do it. Getting angry at a cartoon character being labelled as a certain sexuality.
I don't think I want to add anything to that. That was really well said. I do want to just touch on the irony of someone maybe saying, just leave things the way they are, when that is the way things are. There are gay mums out there. They've had, like, maybe she's bi, so she's had a relationship with a man. Maybe she was never bi. Maybe she was never attracted to men, but that was just the way that things were, in her day. In the country town that she grew up in, it wasn't accepted that she could be gay. She hooked up with a guy. They didn't work out, possibly for obvious reasons. And they've got these 2 kids. Great, okay, but she can still be gay. And that story is so oftenly told. One of my old bosses, he's a gay man. The moment I met him, I knew he was gay. Like, the moment I met him. And then I found out that he had 4 kids and a wife. And I was like, that's not what I expected. Okay, cool, okay, whatever. No, turns out he was actually gay, and he was hiding that part of his personality for so long. He since has split up with that wife, and the kids have come to accept this new lifestyle. He has a partner who's a male, and they live together and actually work together, and he seems a lot more himself now. And that story is told a million times all over the world. So
100%.
to leave things the way they are is to include these sort of things in stories. I mean, it's just silly not to.
100%. And it's incredibly telling that the only people who want to leave things the way they are, in inverted commas, are the people that have generally benefited from the way things have been for their entire existence. And I am a middle-class white guy. I am fully aware of the inherent privilege that comes with that. And that's a very touchy subject that goes beyond that. But I also have the added benefit in that sense of being heterosexual. So you throw it all in, I've got no drawback. I'm the middle-class, heterosexual, white male. And people like me have benefited from that for generations. Now that that's being challenged, centuries, 100%. You've got people that are understanding, and I'm not ashamed of who I am or where I'm from, but that, doesn't mean that I can't sit back and say, hey, other people catching up ain't a bad thing.
Absolutely. I just want to remind the listeners, this is a Rugrats podcast.
This has got deep and serious at the moment, but good point.
Oh man, I haven't been able to shake that cough recently, but that was... Look, I'm so glad that we went down this tangent because I think it's well worth being said. Thank you for saying it. Thank you for bringing it up. It's sad that it's being said like it's a controversy. Like I didn't actually know what the controversy was. I think you told me throughout the week, but I've forgotten. And it shouldn't be a controversy. It shouldn't even be a storm in a teacup. But here we are, and I'm glad you've said it. I totally agree with you. So what if we're two left-wing snowflakes or whatever? But this is a Rugrats podcast. Good luck to the new Rugrats series. I don't like the style of the animation, but what I do like is the cut of their jib. Let's move on to a bit of a where are they now? Obviously, we know that the Rugrats themselves are, in 3D animation style in 2021, so that's something. A show that you used to like in the 90s and 2000s, Dan, it was on the Cartoon Network here in Australia. It was the Powerpuff Girls.
Oh, hell yeah. I love the Powerpuff Girls.
The person that voiced Buttercup, who's the green one from the Powerpuff Girls, was also the same person that voiced Tommy Pickles in Rugrats, Elizabeth Daily. Yeah. So a little bit of a crossover there. Another one of your favorite shows, of course, as I mentioned, The Simpsons. The voice of Bart Simpson, Nancy Cartwright, also voiced, or was one of the voices rather, of Chucky Finster. Chucky Finster had a couple of people voice him over the years, but Nancy Cartwright did a bulk of that as well, and is currently doing so again. So it's a couple of pretty famous people in there who have a huge body of work, particularly Nancy Cartwright. Her body of work is just... Go and have a look at it if you haven't. It is astonishing how many projects she's been a part of.
You're not wrong. It is also worth pointing out, you've got Tress MacNeille, who voiced Charlotte.
Yeah.
She voiced Charlotte. She voiced a bunch of different voices in The Simpsons. So Agnes Skinner, I think, was the big one. She was Mum. Seymour. She was Mum in Futurama, and Futurama is one of my favourite shows. It's such a good show. And I believe she was in Animaniacs as well. I can't remember off the top of my head who she voiced in Animaniacs, but I'm fairly confident she was involved there as well. She's a prolific voice actor.
Yeah, it's always funny looking through the credits list on a lot of these animated shows. So, you mentioned BoJack Horseman earlier. Will Arnett has done a bunch of animated movies and TV shows. He is the voice of BoJack, but he's also been in a bunch of stuff as a live action actor as well. But a lot of these sort of low-key people that you otherwise wouldn't have heard of unless you pay attention to the credits at the end of your favorite show, They're in everything. Like, there's so much cross pollination across all these different shows. And here's a bit of a weird flex for you. I can't remember the name of the show. I think it's called Tipping Point. It's a brand new, not brand new, but it's been a couple of years old game show where basically you answer trivia questions. If you get the trivia question right, you can drop a coin down this thing, and if enough coins drop out at the end, you get money. It's really silly. But I enjoy the trivia part, and it's one way to spend time with my mum. And she was really impressed the other day because the question came up on the TV, and it said, which animated TV show from the 1990s featured the vocal talents of Tim Curry and Flea? And I'm just like, before even the answers, because it's multiple choice, before even the answers came up, I was just like, the Wild Thornberrys. And then my mum just, saw it come up, and she laughed. So I'm just like, oh yeah, bang, flex, whatever.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, that's a flex moment for sure.
But it's only because we spoke about the fact that Flea was in that show like a month ago that I even remembered it.
Once it's there, it's there. It's like when I did, my vague research for this show, one of the names I did come across was Joe Alasky, who is unfortunately deceased now, died 3 or 4 years ago, I think. He was Grandpa Lou in Rugrats.
Yeah.
But I read a little bit about him, and I sort of ended up in this bit of a deep dive. He was sort of considered one of the great mimic voice actors, so he could basically impersonate or imitate all these voices. So he did a lot of work on things like the Looney Tunes after Mel Blanc died.
Ah.
So like Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Duck Dodgers, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He did a lot of voice work once Mel Blanc and a few other really famous voice actors passed on, which was an interesting one to see. But I think he was basically working right up till he died sort of 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, there you go. Well, a great career for him also. And look, I probably had enough of talking about the Rugrats. We talked about, obviously, our childhood memories. We talked about the careers of the people involved. We've talked heavily about politics and human rights and representation in the media. So I think it's probably time that we talk about some things that aren't talked about anymore. What are some 90s sayings that we just don't hear about anymore? Last week, you told us about your mum. But what have you got for us this week?
Your mum. This week, anyone who has ever watched any 90s wrestling with Stone Cold Steve Austin will remember when he opened a can of whoop-ass.
Yes!
Nobody's out there opening cans of whoop-ass anymore.
I actually have an odd memory that you just popped straight into my head. I thought that a can of whoop-ass was a literal thing. Now, like, I'm not I'm not incorrect in saying that's not a real thing, right? Like, that's just a saying. You're gonna whoop someone's ass, right? I'm gonna open a can of whoop-ass. Well, like, I used to play like junior rugby league, which for any Americans out there, it's I don't know, kind of like rugby union but better, and
way better.
It's way better, like way less boring. And I was, 7 or 8 years old, and then Dan used to play junior rugby league as well, where you live, and it was. You would have been this kid, actually, in the team, by the sounds of you, because it sounds like you were the obnoxious dickhead, yep. and I was the quiet kid that just didn't want to talk to anybody. I was basically just playing football because my dad told me to, right? Like, so, like, my best football years were when I stopped playing football. I suddenly got really fast and everything. I would have been really good, probably. But when I was a kid, I was hopeless because I just didn't want to tackle or go near anybody. But anyway, I'm lining up and getting my fingernails clipped by the referee and all that sort of stuff, who would have been like a 14-year-old boy. And one of the obnoxious kids in my team just went, all right, we're going to open a can of whoop-ass or whatever the hell, because they probably also watched wrestling. And I have no idea what was happening. The only can that I'd be opening that day was a can of Coke. I had no idea what was happening. So I was infinitely confused for a long time. I eventually worked it out with context, whooping someone's ass, right? But I assumed it was kind of like a whoopee cushion. So I kind of pictured like opening a can of whoop ass would make a big farting sound or something. Yeah, like so I was just so confused. Or maybe someone farted into a can and you're gonna open it in front of your enemy and like knock them out or something. I don't know, but like, my 7 or 8 year old brain or whatever I was running a muck. But yeah, opening a can of whoop ass. There we go.
I love it.
So there's a little anecdote you probably weren't expecting when you lined up this one.
This whole episode has been unexpected, I think.
It's very on brand for us, actually. I find this is like, you know, this sounds a little bit self-indulgent, and please allow it. But one thing I really like about this show, like, at least being part of it, is that we go in with like a run sheet, like, which is so bare bones. Like, I couldn't even save it properly on the Word document, so I just said to you, mate, just same as last time, whatever. You're like, yep, sweet. I'm like, cool.
And if I can just interject there, I didn't even open an old one.
You're just trusting me to run this ship, and I respect that.
I'm just fucking for the comic relief, clearly.
And that's cool. Like, but like we do go down some avenues. Like, today's was like bizarre. Like, I can't believe we landed there on that. I cannot believe we landed on the representation of gay women in a Rugrats podcast.
I love it. It's, you know, we can all sit here and talk about the serious aspects of what we talk about, but there are people that are infinitely smarter than us with infinitely more understanding of what they're talking about that go into greater detail, and they dedicate whole podcasts and whole series to unpacking creative media. So if we were trying to just do that, I think, you know, we're probably wasting everybody's time. But I think the reason that we are, you know, getting a good number of downloads and return listeners is that you don't really know where things are going to go by the end of it.
Sometimes editing is so much fun, and thank you to Mark Adams for sending through his input for the Rugrats episode from his podcast, Right in the Childhood, for We Made This, because finding a place to slot it into this episode, to find the right beat to throw it in, can be so tricky sometimes, depending on the episode. Like, and it'll depend on what he says in his input when I eventually get to listen to it, because it'll be like, where do I go with this episode? Like, right now, it's supposed to be talking about opening a can of whoop ass, but we're just gibbering about, I don't know, like, the next thing we talk about is existentialism. So I guess we could say we've opened a can of whoop ass on the schedule for this podcast. It is just completely shattered. Is that an appropriate use of the word or the phrase, Dan?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The example I had there was, I lent him my Game Boy and he broke it. I'm going to open a can of whoop ass now.
Yes.
So perfectly in line with that usage, I think.
So the definition, of course, is not to open a can of a smelly substance.
No physical can. It means there's going to be fisticuffs. There's going to be a bit of punch on, or some physicality, I guess. If you don't want to go full fisticuffs, a bit of physicality at the very least, because things are going down. So
to throw back to last episode, we're in the bowling alley. Smokey's bowled an 8. But there's a toe over the line. It's a foul. He's in for a world of pain as Walter is pointing a gun at him, threatening it unless he writes the foul down as a 0. Would you say that Walter was prepared to open a can of whoop ass on Smokey?
I would say that is a very accurate representation of that moment.
And I'm glad we were able to bring it around full circle. Dan, one of my favourite segments of this podcast is listening to you talk about some of the absolute batshit weird things that you find in the 90s that you've happened to have stumbled upon. I don't think stumbled upon is the right term, though, because I think you go looking for this really weird nonsense, such as Suburban Commando from last episode with Hulk Hogan and Christopher Lloyd. et al. And Shelley Duvall, who's really only known for being tortured in The Shining by her director. So, okay. Dan, what have you stumbled upon in the last week?
So yes, what I have stumbled upon / dived into, and what I'm doing at the moment at least is deep diving IMDb, finding something, and then trying to link from there. Now, IMDb is this huge wave of link after link after link with actors and movies and TV shows and all this. So you can sort of just go on some random, tangents. I don't think this is that random. I think it's a movie that some people will know. It's fucking awful. Again, I'm wasting huge chunks of my own life on this. Basically took a huge sidestep, and I thought, let's go with another Christopher Lloyd movie.
Okay.
Now, I'm kind of obsessed with Christopher Lloyd at the moment. As I mentioned last week, the Mark Maron podcast, WTF interview, and I watched, I think it was called Nobody with Saul Goodman, whatever his real name is.
Odenkirk?
That's it, Bob Odenkirk.
Yeah.
I can't believe I blanked on Bob Odenkirk's name. I think it's called Nobody.
Yeah, it just came out like in the last few months or so.
Yeah, which is not bad. Now, Christopher Lloyd is looking fucking old, and he is old. He was born in like 1935 or some shit.
Yeah.
Dude is old. But he plays a great role. He sort of cuts loose, not to spoil the movie, but he plays a great role. So I took a sidestep, looked at some Christopher Lloyd movies. Now, in the best knowns, you've got some great stuff. Now, most of it is before the 90s. You're looking at Clue, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Now, Clue is one of my favourite movies, just ever. I love it. I think it's a great movie, mostly because I just love Tim Curry. Addams Family Values, too good a movie, too well known for a stumbled upon, if you ask me. So I went to the late 90s for a movie starring Christopher Lloyd, Kathleen Turner, Kim Cattrall, Dom DeLuise, Peter McNichol, a movie called Baby Geniuses.
Yes, I've heard of Baby Geniuses. That's directed by Bob Clark, if memory serves.
That is correct. Now, this is a movie where scientists hold super intelligent talking babies captive, but things take a turn for the worse when the mix-up occurs between a baby genius and its twin. Hilarity ensues. I'll be honest, I had a nap halfway through, a bit late in the afternoon, and the sun was sort of on my back. But it's just fucking mental. And, like, the dubbed over voices on these babies just terrify me, and I've been having nightmares ever since I watched it of just babies with their mouths sort of randomly moving and, you know, horrible words coming from them. So I mean, looking at what comes after it, because they've made a shit ton of sequels and a lot of them star John Voight. So, and I mean, you talk about right-wing nut job, John Voight's right up there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the peak of the franchise very clearly. But it was a fucking wild ride. And for that many good actors, it was a bad movie. It was bad. It made Roger Ebert's most hated movies of all time. Wow. Yes. Which is a pretty good sign.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say it has a Metascore of 6 out of 100 from 50 critic reviews.
It's generous. I mean, if you scroll down, the trivia on IMDb is included on film critic Roger Ebert's most hated list. The goof is just like obvious stunt doubles. The quotes are shit. The crazy credits are shit. The connections is just at the movies, the worst films of 1999. Like, it's fucking bad.
I just saw a quote from Roger Ebert's review of this, which he gives 38 out of 100. So that means 1.5 stars for him, because he gives 1 out of 4. So
I was going to say, he liked this more than Suburban Commando.
Yeah, it looks like it. But like his quote is, "Bad films are easy to make, but a film as unpleasant as Baby Geniuses achieves a kind of grandeur." I can't find anything from David Sterrett, though, unfortunately. From the
say that. Last week I had a David Sterrett quote lined up. He actually really liked
The Big
What do we
Lebowski.
talk about? The Big Lebowski. He liked it at the time, so he's ahead of his time, David Sterrett.
Respect to David Sterrett
Yeah.
from the Science Christian Monitor,
Christian
the Christian
Monocle.
Science Monitor. Or
Yeah,
something.
that's it. Something like that. He's the man. It's just, I think unpleasant is the perfect word to describe this movie.
Well, so in other words, you would not recommend that I also stumble upon it.
No, look, I'd go out of my way to stumble around it if I were you.
Stumble on it if you can, like, and then just walk past it,
Crush
trample
it.
it.
Yeah.
The thing that I stumbled upon, Dan, I didn't actually consume any 90s media this week, apart from, of course, Rugrats, which we've discussed. I know, I'm sorry. Whatever. I'm sorry. Let's put it down to a mental health sabbatical, and I've just given myself a bit of rest from a bunch of media sources. But I did look up an article that I thought might be an interesting talking point. So it's from a website called Collide, which is a bit of a contrarian website, which means it just fits in with my MO completely when it comes to media. And one, because Rugrats is so contrarian, and they had a list of Tarantino's best movies. Well, so they had a list of all of Tarantino's movies. Quentin Tarantino, the great film director of 90s classics like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And they ranked them. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll check this out. I usually don't agree. But I agreed mostly with this one. And what I wanted to say is that, like, the last movie on its list was The Hateful Eight, which I was very on board with, because I was like, that movie sucked. I don't know. Like, a lot of people liked that movie. I thought it sucked.
Such a letdown.
Yeah. Death Proof was number 9. Fair enough, whatever. It had Kill Bill Volume 1 at 8 and Kill Bill Volume 2 at 7. I'd probably switch those and then move them up the list. I would, and then it had Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at 6. It had Django Unchained at 4. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because the 3 90s movies that Tarantino made haven't been mentioned yet. They're all in the top 4. Now, coming at number 4, the lowest ranked of his 90s movies was Reservoir Dogs. Interesting, I thought. So it came at number 4. That means they loved it a lot. Very good movie. But, and I agree with this, a little bit unpolished. Just, he got better.
Yeah.
He got better, Number 3, as in the second best of his 90 movies, Pulp Fiction. That means, and number 2 was Inglourious Basterds, which came out in 2009. I would probably give that the number 1 for best movie that he's made. So that means that number 1, the best movie according to Collide.com, that Tarantino has ever made is the 1997 underrated classic, Jackie Brown. Have you seen Jackie Brown?
I have. I liked it a lot. I wouldn't have had it number 1, but I can see why, you cause a little bit of controversy as well, which you've said they're not adverse to. But also, I think there is an argument that it can at least be made. It's not so fancifully ridiculous that it's obvious clickbait.
See, I think it is.
Inglourious Basterds is so good.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's Pulp Fiction is my favorite. I said this to my housemate the other day. I'm like, Pulp Fiction is my favorite, but I think Inglourious Basterds is his best film. And he's just like, how can you say the two are separate at that point? Favorite is best. And I'm like, no. Favorite is not best. Like, it's not best. Like, I can look at Pulp Fiction and go, oh, the memories, the nostalgia, the whatever. Rugrats is my favorite show of the 90s. It's not the best. It's not the best. We know that now. The best is probably The Simpsons.
Yes, we fucking do.
The best is probably The Simpsons. But my favorite was Rugrats at the time. My favorite is Pulp Fiction. The best, I think, is Inglourious Basterds. But according to Collide.com, the best is Jackie Brown. And I think it's very, very interesting. So I guess what I'm saying is I have not stumbled upon these movies this week, but I have stumbled upon this list, and I tell you what, it has made me want to watch Jackie Brown again. Like, I think it's worth a rewatch. So maybe in a future episode, maybe by the next one, I will have watched Jackie Brown, and I'll report back, because I'm very keen to see if it does hold up to that level.
See how you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a long time since I watched it as well, so I'm very interested to see how you go with that.
Yeah, because I mean, I watched Pulp Fiction fairly recently. It was on a film screening, actually. It had all the, it looked like shit because because this film was like 27 years old. It wasn't a digital version of it on the screen. So it looked really shit. But it was Pulp Fiction. There was a bit of a thing to it, and it's great. It's a great movie to watch. And I've watched *Inglourious Basterds* fairly recently. But yeah, Jackie Brown, number one. So, I don't know, worth a watch, I think. So that's what I stumbled upon this week. And that brings us to the end of the show, Dan, almost, at least, because I recommended Rugrats to you, and that did not go great. So, so it's your turn to potentially take some revenge on me. I think we're due for an album now. So
yeah, we're going to go for a bit of music.
Yeah.
We're going to go for, it's the third studio album, one of my favourite bands of all time, not just of the 90s, Green Day. It is Dookie, 1994 studio album release, Dookie.
That surprises me, the fact that you said it's their third album, because to me, Green Day started with Dookie. Did they have two albums before that?
They did. They had this was their like debut on a major label. So it's one of those things that it kind of has the first cred, I guess. But they did have two albums before. So I know they had Kaplunk, which was like 91, 92.
Yeah.
And they had something before that I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to Google it. But they definitely had one before that. So interesting to see. But I'm going to go Dookie.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Thanks for that. I had no idea that they had a couple of albums before that. My big introduction to Green Day would probably have been Nimrod album, 1997. Of course, everyone remembers Good Riddance, Time of Your Life. And that was on Nimrod.
Unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life.
And every fucking kid had to sing that at their primary school, elementary school graduation. And every fucking kid that learned guitar learned that fucking song and sung it at said graduation. It was so... I think that's one of the most overrated songs I can remember because it's just like it's got played way too much. I think it's fine.
It got overplayed and overdone by people who couldn't sing or couldn't fucking play music. It has some bittersweet memories for me. I do like it as a song because I remember it when it was fresh in my mind. But it's also linked to the funerals of two pretty close friends of mine. It was played at both their funerals, so. It's one of those things that also has the little extra emotional sadness that comes with that as well. So there's some Nimrod's got some Hitchin' a Ride.
Hitchin' a Ride was cool.
It's got Walking Alone as well, I think, on that album. So Hitchin' a Ride is a great song. But no, Dookie, which is a little bit. I think there was an album. Insomniac came out in between those two.
Yeah.
Dookie, we've got some absolute bangers. A lot of singles. Some good songs. I'm looking forward to it. I'm blanking on songs apart from Basket Case and Welcome to Paradise. I know there's a really big one that I love on there.
When I Come Around.
But that's the one. When I Come Around.
Yeah.
Is another great song. It's a great album. So.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I wouldn't say Green Day is one of my favorite bands, but Dookie's a very well regarded album. It's one of your favorites, so I'll give it the due attention it needs. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for that recommendation. That's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to that episode, which of course all of our listeners can catch next week on Pretty Fly, a 90s Nostalgia podcast. Thank you to our broadcasters at We Made This Podcast Network. Very big shout out to our boss, Tony Black, one of the good men of the podcasting world. Thank you to Mark Adams for his contribution to this episode. He has a number of podcasts on the We Made This network. He has Right in the Childhood. He has Life's Milestones, which you've been on, Dan. Is that it for We Made This podcast for him?
No, I think he's on Shipwrecked and Comatose,
yes.
Red Dwarf podcast. He's also got like 3 podcasts that aren't part of the network. Every time we speak, we come up with ideas for podcasts we should do together that would just have the nichest audiences of all time. He's a guy, we're both guys that can't say no to podcasts, so it's bad when we communicate, but he's a wonderful guy.
He also works as a celebrant, I believe. Weddings, the wedding industry's taken a bit of a hit because of the pandemic. So I guess he has more time for podcasts at the moment. So he's probably biting off more than he can chew. But we do appreciate Mark for his contribution to this episode. And I do love listening to his episodes of Life's Milestones, which you put me onto after you appeared on it. I've always wanted to appear on it myself, but I've got nothing to say.
I'm sure. Well, look, I didn't think I had that much to say either, but we talked for about 4 hours that day before we recorded.
You always have that much to say.
Yeah, true. I was just trying to be humble about my ability to talk absolute fucking nonsense for a lengthy period of time. It's worth mentioning that Mark does listen to every episode of this podcast.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
Except last week. He messaged me to say very specifically the Big Lebowski episode would be the first one he didn't listen to because he fucking hates that movie. So
okay. All right. Well,
shout out,
Mark. Also, fuck you, I suppose.
Yeah. Go fuck yourself. You know? Big Lebowski's a great movie, but
we don't want you here now. So if you're listening now,
if you can't have us at our worst, you don't deserve us at our best.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Our worst was not Big Lebowski. We've had some interesting shows, but
this is definitely our most feminist episode, Dan. We've gone from talking about representation of gay women in the media to quoting Marilyn Monroe with perhaps one of her most
true. Yes, I was about
statements.
to say who quoted Marilyn Monroe. I'm like, I did.
You did just then. So, but yes, no, of course we're just kidding. Mark's a lovely guy, and we're very thankful to have him listening, as we are to all of you. Until next week, Dan, when we're talking about Dookie by Green Day, which is a funny old album name. Thanks very much for your time today, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. The pleasure is always mine, Bo. Always.
Well, it's also mine, like a little bit.
Aww.
It's like maybe like 15% mine and 85% yours.
Oh, I'm down with that. That works for me.
All right, mate. Cheers.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to Pretty Fly. He's been Daniel Lang. I've been Bo Nicholson. This is a Pioneer podcast production, and it's hosted on the We Made This network. Thanks for your company. See you next time.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Gotham University, a Batman podcast.
God, so speaking of masks, there has been some news. It sounds like Zack Snyder is in the news again. What's going on with the masks, Jay?
My boy Zack! Just when you thought that the controversy of Zack Snyder was simmering down, he rose back up and just not only blew up the internet, not only broke the internet, he figuratively and probably literally fucked it right back into hysteria with this whole Batman news going on right now.
We dig music.
I recently watched the movie that came out recently of the book about all the black metal scene.
Oh, yes. I actually have that book. Lords of Chaos.
Lords of Chaos, that's it, yeah. I watched the Lords of Chaos
That's
movie.
the one with Macaulay Culkin's brother in it.
Yes.
Or something like that.
It's really good.
And where they really, really pissed off Varg by casting someone Jewish to play him.
Which is always a good idea.
Yeah.
Always piss off Varg McCann if you can, because he's a f***ing bellend. Not scared of you, Varg, even though you stabbed people 27 times.
And got caught on a train with a rocket launcher
Yeah.
at one point.
He's a bit of a bellend.
A little bit racist. A little bit questionable.
Yeah, just a bit.
Uses papyrus as a font of choice.
And that's his worst crime.
100% is. I'm not even joking. Like, he's done some bad shit, but Papyrus, fucking acceptable.
Beautiful.
We are Starfleet, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
Oh, look at Garrick. You know, he looks so cute in this.
Or I'm watching an episode he's not in, and I wonder what Garrick's doing right now.
Where's
maybe
he
I
at?
should text him and see what he's doing.
Okay,
text him, see if he's watching this. Yeah.
So are you guys like texting buddies? Do you have a group chat going?
Pretty much. Yeah. It's a bit alarming, particularly when I accidentally get CC'd on the Obsidian Order chat. But
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.